You may have occasion to possess or use material things, but the secret of life lies in never missing them. Gandhi, December 10th, 1938.
Of course, detachment is one of the key spiritual principles in the world. It's so easy for us to get attached to things, not to mention people. And this is a gentle reminder that always remind ourselves that these things are not permanent. That will give us a cushion against that tendency to cling on to things and, in so doing, actually lose sight of who we are.
And this, of course, is one of the perennial reminders from Buddhism as well, that attachment to objects, investing your sense of self, your sense of help, of selfness, of contentment within these physical objects, which are impermanent and transitory, very breakable, very losable, then you are guaranteed to suffer, because these things will eventually go away. These things will eventually be broken and lost. And if you can find other ways to generate a sense of contentment and satisfaction that come from the inside rather than from things on the outside, which will always, again, be broken and lost and change, then our sense of contentment, our sense of personal satisfaction can become more permanent, can become much more stable in the very least, and our lives will feel much better. This is one of the great secrets of the Buddha.
Power is of two kinds. One is obtained by the fear of punishment, and the other by arts of love. Gandhi, Young India, January 8th, 1925.
This dictum of Gandhi's has supported me and guided me for decades. And it's so useful for us to remember this is what orients our choices at every moment. Are we going to reach for coercion or cooperation? Are we going to reach for the kind of power that ultimately can be enforced by materiel? Or are we going to turn to our heart and use the power of love?
And it does feel as though that is a consistent question asked by leaders and people in power. Do I try to rule through respect or through fear? Do I generate change through force or through cooperation? And again, if our goal as a people is to live in a world without force, without fear, then we must learn as rulers in various forms, from whether it's at the household level to the grand political level, to generate these qualities that we're looking for, while we also generate the respect and love of the people, so that we can move forward together rather than at odds with each other.
Under certain circumstances, fasting is the one weapon which God has given us for use in times of utter helplessness. Absence of food is an indispensable but not the largest part of it. The largest part is the prayer, communion with God. It more than adequately replaces physical food. Gandhi in a letter to Mirabin from Iravda Mandir.
Yeah, fasting was the ultimate weapon that you could fall back on. It's to be used with great discretion, because when you refuse to take food, on one level you're saying, I'm no longer part of your society. I'm no longer part of you. Ultimately, fasting implies the willingness to lay down your life, and that is the ultimate weapon in satyagraha, and that's why it's to be used only very rarely, which is a mistake that beginning activists often make.
as a kid reading the book by Hermann Hesse, the Siddhartha book, which is a generated story about the life of the Buddha or a Buddha. And one of the things that happened is, because of the way he grew up and the skills that he had learned how to fast, he had learned how to meditate and rest, he learned how to be comfortable not needing anything. And because of that, life became very easy for him. He only needed to eat when he needed to eat. He knew how to rest deeply and slow his system down so it wasn't using resources. He felt contented without needing lots of things. He knew how to sleep outside. And so he had very few needs in the world. And I think from that perspective, if we gain this ability to fast, as Gandhi is talking about, because you can teach your system how to slow down and use fewer resources, then in times of great difficulty, we can certainly be safer. We can make it easier to live. And at the same time, I think that Gandhi is also talking about using fasting as a tool for nonviolence, for satyagraha in the world. And again, for me, because this is not a health action, and I'm a believer that everything that we do should be healing not just our community, but ourselves and our physical nature as well. I know that the Hindu perspective and some of the Buddhist perspectives as well is that the body does not mean anything. We transcend, we leave the body behind. And from the Taoist perspective, of course, that is, we have a very different view. And so we want to nurture the body as well as the spirit and other things. And so I do not recommend damaging your body in order to achieve your goals at any time, but I certainly appreciate that Gandhi was willing to go so far in order to help the people around him, and it was clearly effective.
If one takes to satyagraha without having measured his own strength, and afterwards sustains a defeat, he not only disgraces himself, but also brings the matchless weapon of satyagraha into disrepute. Gandhi, Satyagraha in South Africa.
We have to remember that when we use what Gandhi here is calling satyagraha, or any form of nonviolence, we're acting not only in our immediate situation for ourselves, but against the backdrop of the world and history. And so people will be watching us. They'll be saying, what on earth is he or she doing? And if we use it inadvisably in a situation in which we cannot really realistically expect to succeed doesn't mean quite exactly winning, but we'll go into that later. But if we use it in a hopeless situation, we're really making a double mistake. We're losing the immediate goal, and we're making satyagraha look bad. We cannot afford that.
What Michael is saying here really draws to mind the importance of maintaining the clear respect of the tradition, and to recognize that when we are representing ourselves as change makers and peace activists in the world, that we are representing this movement as a whole. And one of the great disservices that activists will do is very often, in the name of whatever cause they are fighting for, they will go do something terrible, something very regrettable, and will give a bad name to the entire movement. And because part of what we're trying to do is allow our movement to be recognized as something beneficial and helpful to the world with no negative side effects, we have to be very careful moving forward if we claim to be speaking in the name of Satyagraha, in the name of the peace movement.
The whole world is like the human body with its various members. Pain in one member is felt in the whole body. Gandhi, May 26, 1946.
Yeah, the universe is organized along a very similar pattern on very, very different scales. And the mystic who can be aware of the interconnectedness, the unity among separate individuals, does see that when I'm hurting, you're hurting. When I hurt you, I'm hurting myself. And that makes nonviolence absolutely the only way to proceed.
This is also true in my experience, the experience of my teachers, that the clearer we become about the nature of ourselves, the nature of our relationship with the world around us, we are genuinely all one. Even at an intellectual level, the more we study about ecosystems and how things function, if you learn about biology and how systems integrate with each other, that every cell itself is independent and yet lives in accord with what we call a whole body and a whole person. Everything at every level works this way. And if we spend enough time in meditation and personal cultivation, we also see it through another lens. And more we become clear that this is all one flow, that we're all in this together. This is one whole world. And if we can help to recognize that we cannot hurt ourselves in one part and not experience it in another. And again, if I injure my left hand, I can't celebrate with my right hand. I can't say, oh, look, my right hand is still fine. My right hand has now gained strength over my left hand. That doesn't even make sense because my whole body is now injured in some way. And it is exactly the same thing with developing compassion. If my left hand is injured, nobody thinks it's strange if my right hand rushes over and stops the bleeding or tries to help heal the wound. Because it's all one body, it's all one thing. In fact, it would be a kind of insanity to treat it any other way. And that is how we treat our human culture around us, the whole world. We're injuring one part thinking that it's supporting the other, when really the whole system is getting worse. We have to learn another way. It's very clear, and you can cultivate clear seeing with that through simple methods like meditation and study.
A burning passion coupled with absolute detachment is the key to all success. Gandhi, September 29th, 1946.
Well, it's easy to imagine a burning passion, and it's easy to imagine detachment, but imagining them both, that is the challenge. That's where the real creativity of nonviolence comes in. And I think we can specify that it's burning passion for one's cause, but detachment from the results, which means ultimately detachments from one's personal stake in the situation. So it's not quite as hopeless a paradox as it seemed.
And at least in the language of Taoism and Buddhism, the idea of a burning passion is actually a negative thing, something that is driving you forward in a way that is out of balance, that is not holistic and sustainable and nourishing. And so we only want to live in a way that is nourishing. I think that this idea of a burning passion here, I can translate it perhaps into language that I prefer. And we can say that instead we're being motivated, we're deeply motivated from the inside by a value to move in a way that is helpful and healing with the world. I don't like using words like driven necessarily because that implies some idea of an ox and somebody behind with a whip moving them forward no matter what. And so these ideas are important. The words are important just because it conveys a feeling. And so we can have a deep motivation to help heal the world. In fact, it's part of why I get up and I train and I do all of this work every single day. And yet, part of that, embedded within that, is this desire to continually move in a balanced and appropriate fashion with the world so that I am not being lost in favor of trying to achieve the goal of a balanced or harmonious world. Otherwise, we burn ourselves out with that burning passion.
All have not the same capacity. It is in the nature of things, impossible. I would allow a man of intellect to earn more. I would not cramp his talent. Gandhi, November 26, 1931.
Unity and diversity, that's the key formula here. But I think what we need to understand to make sense of it socially is that while a person using a higher faculty, like the intellect, can earn more money, it by no means implies that that person has greater rights or greater privileges or even, well, maybe to some extent, greater responsibilities. But that's all. So there's nothing wrong with a sense of high or low. What we have to get rid of is a sense of superior and inferior.
That certainly makes sense, that if I'm in a job and we're defining categories of labor, hierarchies of decision making, maybe there's a person making decisions, and then further down that chain, down that ladder of little arrows that we draw that goes to this person, which moves to these three people, these engineers, and this person that sells it. That sense of higher and lower is fine, but not better and worse. Or as Michael's saying, not superior to or inferior to somebody else. And the more that we can move away from that kind of language and that kind of thought, that somebody is actually better or more important than another person, then that moves into the direction of, well, one person, it's okay to be more violent to this person or to treat this other person better. And not only does it stifle the person who's below, who's considered inferior in that case, but it's also damaging to the person who's in the supposedly superior position because it separates them from the rest of humanity. It causes grudges to be showing up. It causes greed to arise, as we see all the time. And so it's a trap. It's a kind of poison for both of them. We have to learn how to nurture and help humanity rise all together, or we'll be lost.
A starving man thinks first of satisfying his hunger before anything else. Gandhi, Young India, March 18, 1926.
Very good to keep us oriented, to keep things in perspective, that basic human needs, food, clothing, and shelter, absolutely must be satisfied, and it's the responsibility of all of us to make sure they're satisfied for everyone. There are higher kinds of needs which can be handled differently, but they're all going to be based on that lower rung of the Maslowian hierarchy.
And just for those people who might not have heard this term, Maslow created a hierarchy of needs. This is this Maslowian hierarchy he's talking about. And the hierarchy of needs is that the first needs that need to be fulfilled are food, shelter, these kinds of things, basic safety. And then we move up slowly along this hierarchy toward friendship and social and relationship needs, needs for recognition, needs to express ourselves. And eventually at the top of this hierarchy that we may eventually have time for is something like spiritual expression, this kind of thing, artistic cultivation. And many people have argued with this discussion quite a lot because people tend to define needs very differently, and it's very clear, as in the case of Gandhi, for instance, that clearly for him, he put things like spiritual cultivation and communal relationships far above the need for things like food and safety. And so very clearly that hierarchy doesn't always work for everybody, but I do feel like it is an important point that Gandhi's making here, which is to say that we need to satisfy the basic human needs of everybody involved. This is part of that human rights discussion, that we all need to consider how to first keep a human safe and healthy and then support them in other ways. There is no way for us to include the desire to help somebody go through college or to be able to achieve higher levels in a corporate situation, but not worry about whether or not children in the street can feed themselves.
It is wrong and immoral to seek to escape the consequences of one's acts. Gandhi, Young India, March 12, 1925.
I won't comment on the immoral part, but the wrong part, I think, is very clear. If we try to escape the consequences of wrong actions, we won't learn from them. If we don't learn from them, we won't grow. And it is unnatural and, in the end, kind of fatal for human beings to be stuck in terms of their ethical development. So it is critically important that we face our mistakes, first of all, for the reason that I just mentioned, and second of all, for humility, which is a critical part of growth for anyone.
And likewise, not only is it helpful for us to share ourselves and to seek the chance to right the wrongs that we have done so that we don't develop levels of shame, but it's also an important part of our own personal cultivation from the perspective of becoming vulnerable, from becoming more honest. The importance of trusting and building a community by letting ourselves be seen and be known. These are important qualities. So it's not just about personal cultivation, but even at the level of community and relationships. If we are people that never apologize for the wrongs that we've done, that we never seek to heal the damage that we've caused, then every single person is living this way. And then pretty soon we have a world where nobody is righting the wrongs or changing what they've done. Nobody's taking responsibility for anything. And so at a personal spiritual cultivation level, of course, this is absolutely important. But even at a larger sense, a relational sense within the social systems around us, this is an absolutely important quality required for systems to function smoothly.
If any action of mine claimed to be spiritual is proved to be unpractical, it must be pronounced to be a failure. I do believe that the most spiritual act is the most practical act in the true sense of the term. Gandhi, July 1st, 1939.
Here we have a rebuttal of one of the, I think, false beliefs that many people entertain, that you have to be either moral or practical. But Gandhi's belief in the order of the universe was such, and this really goes back to a long-standing vision of Vedanta culture in which he grew up, that life makes sense. The universe is organized to help us grow, and morality is just a way of codifying the basic laws, the dynamics of being.
I 100% agree with Michael here that it seems as though the entire world is shaped around helping humans become their better selves. Not only are humans born in a state where we are essentially, most of the time, good people, kind people, open-hearted, generous. I feel like this is an essential part of a human nature. When a human is healthy and balanced and put into a safe situation, this is who we become. And so, and even in terrible situations, again, as I mentioned before, that Rebecca Solnit book, The Paradise Built in Hell, that even in the worst situations, often this amazing side, the angels of our better nature, seem to arise and show themselves. And so it seems as though this is a fundamental aspect of human nature. And then on top of it, suffering arises anytime that we're not like that, anytime that we're caught up in our little ego, our egoic self, and I want this thing, I need this, I can't have it, I throw a tantrum, I'm angry, all of those things cause huge suffering for us. And then the more free from those qualities that we become, the happier and more contented we are, the better it feels. And so literally we have this almost a uncomfortable cattle prod floating around behind us, shocking us every time that we are behaving poorly and using ourselves inappropriately. And then this wonderful carrot in front of us of wonderful feelings of compassion and open-heartedness and love and contentment and peace every time we settle into our truest nature. And so it seems very clear that the shape of the universe almost is designed around helping us become our best self. And so this also functions within this movement of peace and nonviolence in the world, because part of what we're trying to create is that shape for everybody, which means there are practical steps everyone can take to move forward, not just to feel good, because it does feel good to be our best self, but that means that it's also creating a better world, because that's what we are when we're healthy and feeling good. We become people who are easier to work with, safer to be around. We create communities that work better. And this is in direct opposition to the image that most people have of humans as born bad, requiring containment so that we don't tear each other apart with our teeth and fingernails. And then the only thing that ever makes us happy and feel good is depravity and the worst possible things about ourselves. And at least in my experience and studies and the experience and studies of my teachers and masters, this is so far from being true, it's laughable. It's actually quite sad. We have to recognize the nature of humanity and how best to nurture it and how best to create the societies around us. And it's through this movement of love and compassion, peace and nonviolence. And together we move forward to actually create the world we want. And we have to abolish this old story of how we are. Michael calls it the old story versus the new story. We have to teach each other how it's possible to be as humans in our world.
Faith must be enforced by reason. The two are not antagonistic as some think. Gandhi, from The Wit and Wisdom of Gandhi.
It is a really serious error of organized religions, of sectarian religions, to demand what is called blind faith of their adherents, and this makes it very, very difficult for the ordinary person to feel secure in such a system. Now, there are definitely things which are beyond my ken. However, I have indirect vision of them through the experiences of people whose vision was much further and clearer than mine, like Gandhiji. So if he sees something that I can't see, I am well advised to trust him. But even there, to put that understanding into practice and constantly experience feedback and readjustment, that's really the successful way to live.
And that's how any good science should function. This science of nonviolence functions because we have teachers, we have professors, so to speak, like Gandhiji and I have with Michael here, that point the way and say, this is what I have learned. Try this out, see if this is true, see if this works. Very much the way that in some college classes and university labs, you can, for yourself, test and figure out the speed of light. And you can find out to see if it's true. These are things that should be tested. We want to find out if it's true that water freezes at 0 degrees Celsius at this particular sea level altitude and how that works. And that's how science works. We test it, we make sure it's actually true. And when it's not true, we throw it out. And when we have guides like this that clearly are successful, that clearly understand a lot, we can take their word for it, but we can then say, let's test it out. And I want to see for myself how nonviolence functions, how well it works to get a group of people together to cultivate and learn. And do they become angry and murder each other, or do they work together well and develop open-heartedness and flower as people? And you can find out which works, which is true. And so we can have faith, we can believe in the wisdom of our teachers and ancient texts and these things, but then we can test what they say. Again, we form a hypothesis, we test the hypothesis, we try to prove that it's not true. We say, okay, if this is true, then this must also be true. And then we experiment. And when it doesn't work, we say, let's try that some other way. And if it's not true, then we find something that is true, and we move forward from there. Don't put blind faith into things. Instead, learn from the people that came before, the way that they did, and advance the science of nonviolence as a whole. Advance this movement as an activist, creating peace and changing the world a bit at a time. We want to base it upon reality, not imagination.
Mine is a life full of joy in the midst of incessant work. Gandhi, Young India, October 1st, 1925.
It would be so helpful for us to realize this. Again, we have this preconception that work is gloomy. I remember a billboard I used to pass on the way down to campus every day that showed a picture of a whiskey bottle lying on its side, and it said, "First the work, then the reward." That is a formula for frustration for your entire life. What Gandhi is teaching us here is the work itself is the reward, especially if you can carry it out in a detached spirit.
And I remember hearing as a kid the old Disney tune, "Whistle While You Work." And that quality of being happy while you're doing something hard is perfectly available. It's a mindset issue. Certainly, of course, some things are miserable, and you want to avoid that kind of work, especially if your job is to hurt people or something like that. You want to try to avoid enjoying that kind of job. But hopefully, again, you have, as we've talked about, this right livelihood quality that you are making your living, taking care of the world, and making things better rather than worse. That's a very important quality. And if we can adopt that, I remember a friend who has children who joyfully clean the house as a family, because starting when they were very young, they made cleaning into a fun thing that the kids enjoy. It's done as a group. People watch this family, like I did, in awe, because I was always taught that cleaning is a hardship. Cleaning is a punishment. And the only difference is the way we approached it. And I feel like we do that so many times in our lives, that we look at work as something to be avoided, as something that makes us unhappy. But if instead we can shift how we see it, and we use work, for instance, as a way to cultivate our skills of presence, or calmness, or kindness. At a grocery store, there was a man who I'm thinking of, at his entire practice, the reason he got the job was to cultivate friendliness, kindness, joyfulness, presence. He wanted to be fully present with each person, so that 8 hours a day he could practice this actual metta meditation that he had learned. And after a couple of years of doing it, he was glowing. He was so happy. He loved his job so much, because not only was he himself filled with joy and light the entire time, but he watched as he made the lives of countless thousands of people better. The waves of peace and love coming just from that store because of this one individual were incalculable. And so imagine the effect that you can have out there in the world, in your life, with your family, with the people and friends around you, making the world better. Change how you see doing difficult things. Turn it into a challenge, turn it into something fun. Your life becomes better in every moment.
True knowledge of religion breaks down the barriers between faith and faith. Gandhi from Iravda Mandir.
Yeah, when you can understand the core belief and vision of any major religion, it will turn out to be the same as the core belief of any other major religion. Really, no religion has said, go out and murder your neighbor if they annoy you. Go out and use the resources of the earth until you're bloated. and the earth is compromised. They all really, I say, at their core, they have exactly the same teachings. The history and the dogmas, the explanations will all be different. So over and over, we see that if we get down to the basic realities of anything, life is a unity.
And by recognizing these values, this idea of the lowest common denominator, the value that is present in all of the various numbers and all the functions that we're looking at. In the same way, we want to find that lowest common denominator between us and other people. In this case, he's talking about between different kinds of religion, because that, of course, was a huge difficulty in Gandhi's world. And it is, of course, in our modern world. And if we're relating to people that have a different idea of the world than we do, we can still break it down to find that lowest common denominator, the part of us that shares that value. We may have a value in honesty. We may both value love and companionship with our families. We value the safety of the people around us. When we can discuss those qualities, we come to agreement every time. It's only a matter of details and figuring out what works best. And when we argue about those things, we don't become angry because we're not talking about identity. We're talking about efficiency. How do we make things better? We agree about that. We move forward. But when we start talking about ideas of identity and things that I think and you're wrong and I'm better and this is worse, then the only thing that can happen is conflict. There's no resolution for that unless somebody is smashed and broken down. Somebody has to give up. And so instead we have to find a way so that everybody wins. And we do that by finding these deep qualities, these deep values that we share. And then when we share those qualities, we build a new relationship from that space. We move forward from that space. And from that space, there's no obstructions or blockages, only the opportunity to heal together.
I address this appeal to you in the hope that our movement may even lead you in the right direction and deflect you from the course which is bound to end in your moral ruin and the reduction of human beings to robots. Gandhi in the London Tribune, October 23rd, 1942.
I would imagine that Gandhi here is addressing himself to Western civilization via the English environment in which he found himself at that time. And I'm afraid that his grim prediction ultimately led right into World War II and the aftermath. Again and again, we see that he had these basic ways of looking at the world which we ignore at our peril.
How many great travesties in the world would have been avoided had the people in power been willing to listen to acclamations of peace, of people crying out and saying, please stop killing each other. Please find a different way, find a better way. And all cultures everywhere throughout time, the people have cried out to the people in power, please stop finding better ways to murder us. Just do your job of making sure sanitations work, make sure the roads are functioning well. Try not to become greedy. Try not to misuse your power. And instead, so often that power becomes corrupted. These people become greedy. And so we end up with wars between great factions who are really just often, usually, two men trying to kill each other for no good reason, because somebody wants something that somebody else has. And so much grand violence is like that. And if one of these people were able to pause and listen to their leaders, and I'm sure it has happened to their spiritual leaders, the people in charge, and saying, look, maybe we can find a better way that doesn't involve killing people. I wonder how many wars have been avoided because somebody calmed down enough to make that kind of statement, and how many countless thousands of lives were saved because of it. So I appreciate so much people like Gandhi consistently reaching out and saying, please, find a better way. I know that Michael has written countless letters and talked with great leaders about this, and who knows how many travesties have been avoided because of their efforts. And so if you have the opportunity to connect with anybody in power, connect with somebody who is likely to do violence even at a level of their family. You see somebody who gets drunk and angry and goes home and is aggressive toward their family. Find a way to intervene without causing more conflict, but rather helping them to maintain their dignity, to become better, to get the help that they need. We have the chance to prevent violence by reaching out and becoming that comforting friend or that wise advisor like Gandhi is here. And we can stop violence at all different levels and stages in our world. But we have to be willing to reach out to do it and to learn the best way to do it, because it is a skillful act.
The proper way to view the present outburst of violence throughout the world is to recognize that the technique of unconquerable nonviolence of the strong has not been at all fully discovered as yet. Gandhi, June 9th, 1946.
People say nonviolence doesn't work. You can't cite any historical example. I say, well, actually, I can cite some historical examples, but we haven't tried it. If you haven't tried something, you can't pass judgment on whether it has worked or not. So once again, he had this very broad historical outlook. He knew where he stood in the march of history, and he was able to explain that the apparent lack of success of nonviolence had nothing to do with the principle itself, but with the fact that we have not really applied it.
And if we had more chances to see how well it functioned, again, our experiment would work better, and we could cite these examples to people who were in conflict and had doubts. And it's reasonable to have doubts, of course. And so how do we as a people then generate a library of resources for people? And this is actually something I'm creating now for future videos, where I can have a library of books and research behind me as I'm speaking and reference it and show, look, this is so much proof. There's so much detail here about how we can live a better world. When people say, well, we just don't know how to do it. Of course we do. We simply have to be willing to try and then try again. And again, always remember that we have been trying this violence thing for countless millennia, and it has never worked. It has only ever created more violence, more deterioration of the world. And it's only the change makers and the peace workers in our world that progress happens, that we find better ways. And it is getting better for humanity. And yet we are still destroying our planet. We are still murdering each other by the countless thousands every day. We have to learn how to make use of these tools of peace and nonviolence in more and more skillful ways and keep applying them. And we are doing it. There are plenty of examples of it around the world. And slowly it replaces these old tools of violence one at a time. The successes are there. We just have to pay attention to them and talk about them enough so that people recognize what's going on.
Woman is more fitted than man to make explorations and take bolder actions in ahimsa. Gandhi, from the mind of Mahatma Gandhi.
All right, we might be putting our foot into some controversial territory here, but I think Gandhi was looking at the basic natural facts that women are suited for both the distress of childbirth itself and the enormous gratification of nurturing and uplifting, raising a human being. And those two, whether you call them nature or culture, those two deeply embedded capacities are much more suitable for someone who wants to be nonviolent. It's also perfectly true that this was a pragmatic statement for him to make, because he felt it was critically important for women to be fully involved in the satyagraha struggle. And in India, perhaps to a degree even more than in Western cultures, women were kept in the home and out of public action. So he was overcoming a lot, and that's why he dug deep into that essential argument.
I also think that maybe part of what Gandhi was talking about here, beyond the cultural values, because he came from a very particular culture, and every culture seems to talk about the relationships that make up our ideas of what it means to be a man or what it means to be a woman, masculine or feminine, active or inactive in our society, this yang and yin quality in each society. And they're all defined differently. Often these are culturally defined terms. And so we need to recognize that as he's making these points, that part of what he's talking about is he's calling upon the part of society that is, as Michael was saying, the inactive, the at home, the quiet society, the ones that aren't speaking out and calling out, but rather to call them forth and to allow the aspect of society which perhaps is more comfortable with being nurturing, with being kind, with being wise rather than aggressive, and asking those qualities to come forth, asking those yin qualities to guide the way rather than the yang, aggressive, overactive, poisoned parts of our society. I think that that is possibly what he's talking about. So many of our actions are guided by maybe what some people call testosterone poisoning. And this idea that we hold up aggression and applications of strength and power and control as a good way to run a society. And then there are the parts of society that think that it's better instead to communicate, to commune, to build alliances, to work through things in a different way. And that certainly one of those functions better within the world of peace and nonviolence than the other.
There would be no one to frighten you if you refused to be afraid. Gandhi, Mahatma, Volume 2.
Over and over again, he is helping us orient ourselves to our inner disposition and turning our attention away from externals, especially when it comes to mental states. We tend to feel that we're absolutely dependent on external things to have the mental state that we want. If I want to be happy, I've got to go out and eat something or drink something or watch something. But someone who has awareness of the enormous capacities within us is able to say from personal experience, everything we're looking for is inside of us, and that gives us a tremendous amount of freedom and liberation from forces like in our civilization in particular, the forces of advertising, both political and commercial, to push us around and make us behave in ways that they want.
I agree 100% with Michael here that learning to recognize that these qualities of contentment and fearlessness reside inside you. They aren't things that you cultivate necessarily from the outside, or that you need to test them in your external world. But these deep qualities of inner strength are called that for a reason. They are qualities that can be gained through sitting quietly in stillness, through cultivating clarity about the nature of your being, about your relationship with the outside world. If you can settle into yourself through these practices, to develop the ability to become fearless, as of course was the first step Gandhi says was needed to become an activist, is to develop fearlessness, then the world becomes much easier because there's nothing out there that's going to scare you. You simply are your best self all the time in actuality with the world, and nobody can suppress or repress you because they have nothing that they can use to frighten you. You are already self-sufficient.
highest honor my friends can do me is to enforce in their own lives the program that I stand for, or to resist me with their utmost if they do not believe in it. Gandhi, Young India, June 12, 1924.
I can't think of any other great figure in history who has actually said this, has actually felt that he or she was his or her contribution to truth and did not mind being dismissed where that contribution was inaccurate, was misplaced. I mean, it shows in one way his tremendous detachment from personal well-being, and in another, his incredible faith in the truth to which he was dedicated his whole adult life.
And it's such a gift to have somebody like Gandhi to dedicate their lives with their own highly developed personal qualities toward trying to make their world and their communities a better and safer place. And and to then say, the best thing that my friends can do for me is to heal themselves and to make the world better for the rest of us as well. And if we can adjust our sights to rather than feeling nourished by, again, getting more stuff or a better car or a different title in my job, but rather we become sufficient in ourselves. We develop everything that we need. We have enough food, we have enough shelter, and now I develop contentment inside. And now I have everything I need. And so I can spend my life making the rest of the world safer and better for everybody else as well. And that is a wondrous quality to see in somebody as strong-willed and as highly developed as Gandhi and Master Michael Nagler.
Whenever I see an erring man, I say to myself, I have also erred. Gandhi, Young India, February 10th, 1927.
This sounds so simple, even simplistic for those of us with our PhDs and so forth, but it is such a salutary reminder. So often during the day, we have this feeling of superiority toward another person. Oh, look, he or she has erred. And then we feel smug. And then what happens? We increase our egotism and we increase our separateness. Nothing is worth that. So the simple formula is, and I found that I can always find, once I understand what a person's, quote, error, unquote, really is, where it springs from, I can always find that tendency in myself. And it's very helpful to do that.
And certainly in traditional Chinese literature, there's, for instance, wonderful quotes from Confucius, Confuzi, who makes the statement that wherever there are 3 people gathered together, if I see 3 people walking by, certainly among them, one of them is my teacher. And this is the idea that if I see somebody who is just like me, I see a mirror of myself, and I can learn more about how I am and what I need to work on. If I see somebody who is worse than I am in any particular way, I can recognize these qualities and how I can continue to better myself and things I need to avoid. And then if I see somebody who is better than myself at any particular thing, of course, I can now look forward to learning from them and becoming better myself. That you can learn from anybody at any time because we're all the same. We're all on this same path and journey together. And for me, one of the great teaching tools that I've discovered in my own life has been working with kids, because for some reason, it's easier for me to see children and to watch them make mistakes, same mistakes that we all make, and to judge them less. Maybe I judge adults more often, more harshly. And so I see a kid stumble and fall down and feel shocked and hurt and cry or something. And I rush over and immediately I feel compassion and want to support this child. But if I see an adult do the same thing, maybe I'm more hesitant to feel compassion for them. Maybe more likely I start to judge them as clumsy or weak if they start to cry or something like that. And these are things that I've been trained to do since I was a kid, to see people like that. And so by working with children, I'm able to start to rethink that process. Because in that child crying, I can say, oh yeah, I have felt that way. I know what it's like to be startled, to feel pain overwhelming your system, your nervous system lights up, your tears shoot to your eyes, and now you also feel humiliated because people are looking at you. I know all of those feelings. I'm really sorry you're going through that. And with that kid, of course, who has not developed any emotional processing or anything like that, you can help them process it with your support and aid as an adult from the outside. And you're learning how to cultivate these skills of peace and nonviolence in this wonderfully innocent form. And if I can then take that, and again, in this strange example of somebody stumbling, falling, if I see an adult fall, maybe a 30-year-old man or something like that who seems to have it all together with their business suit on or something like that, and they stumble and fall, they hurt themselves, they feel humiliated, they start to cry. Why do I need to judge them? Instead, it's the exact same situation. I see how they feel. I know what it's like to feel embarrassed in front of people, especially if I'm dressed nicely. Maybe I tore my clothing. Maybe in that moment I was feeling especially fragile because I'd just lost a job, or I was especially afraid of what this girl was going to think of me. And it's overwhelming emotionally. And so I start to cry. I know those feelings. I can understand them. I'm not better than them. I've been in that exact place. And so why does it matter if it's a child or an adult or an elder or a leader? We're all the same. We're going through the same process. And so my process of supporting that adult male is probably different than it is with a kid. But my empathy is the same. And if we can cultivate that empathy in everything that we do for the exact same good reasons, then we can become nurturing and healing in the world rather than causing more problems everywhere we go. And so my plea to you as an individual is to not treat people like children, but rather to see everybody as part of the same journey, part of the same family. And adults are still just people. Kids are still just people. We have the same process going on inside. We all know what it's like to feel afraid, to feel embarrassed or humiliated, to be afraid, to be overwhelmed, to be in pain. And these things spur people to do bad actions, to protect themselves, to restore their dignity, to defend themselves, to try to feel better. And very often it's just very unskillful behavior. They're trying something to make them feel better. They punch somebody else in the face, hoping that it makes them feel more dignified later. It doesn't work. It's not a way to help build confidence and to stop the fears from bothering you, but people don't know. And so if we can ourselves cultivate understanding of where these things come from, we cultivate our empathy, our understanding, so we can see people clearly during these moments of grand despair for them. And we cultivate our ability to help them, because it requires skills to navigate these tricky circumstances, to help uplift them. That's on the one-on-one individual level. And then these communities, these social situations, even wars, are just collections of these hurt individuals lashing out. It's not any different. Maybe the skills required are different, but the compassion is the same. And so if we can recognize that we're just people, I see a person who makes a mistake, I say to myself, I have made that mistake so many times. I get it. I am going to be the person I wish that I had the last time I made that mistake. How much safer does the world become? How much better does it become for every single person who might happen to be somebody who makes mistakes? Maybe that's not you. Maybe you don't make mistakes. But most likely, we're all in this together, fumbling around trying to be human. And together we make a better world, uplifting each other, one reaching out hand at a time. If you can today, reach out, lift somebody else up. That's your homework. And put down in the comments section how you choose to make the world a better place today.